Check. 1 2 1 2. We are back. We are the Go Defenders. This will be, our second episode of kind of the new season after our 1 year anniversary. Um, we're here. I'm kind of still in shock. Like, we just found out about the passing of an NBA legend. I think legend is almost um, an understatement, but Kobe Bryant passed away today. He was in a helicopter crash. Apparently, he died at the age of 41 in Calabasas, California. His 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, was also in the helicopter at the time, and two others that I guess were associated with her travel team, a player and a parent, also passed away in the crash. And I'd be lying if I said this hasn't thrown off my day. Would be lying if I said it hasn't thrown off kind of like what we were going to even talk about on here in the episode. Like, this wasn't planned at all. This is kind of spur of the moment. But I guess, in the conversations we've had even before filming or recording, I think what gets lost in translation is this idea of what do we do when our legends pass. And I think in this era of digital media, social media, it has changed. I feel like people feel like they have an obligation to kind of public face about people that they might not necessarily had any real connection to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think first we want to, kind of just talk about the craziness of this even happening. But then I guess move forward and thinking about like, what do we do when our legends pass? And even thinking about like Nipsey Hussle recently passed, like when he passed away, a lot of people were posting and talking and some of them, may have had a connection to his music. Some of them may not have, but like, I'm sure like even this happening, Kobe's going to become a trend in a way that's, much larger than his basketball career or, his impact on the court. And what do we think about that? And then just moving forward, I would love to have Ev's opinion on some of the stuff, you being in the space of sports journalism. What does this mean to your field, and what did he even mean personally to you as an athlete or whatever? And hopefully we can bring some sort of closure to this topic. But I guess we can start with just where were you? How did you feel when you heard about the news that Kobe passed away?
I was actually on my way here, and a friend called me and was like, "Yeah, you hear about this with Kobe? You say he died of a helicopter crash." Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
Because obviously, me being in journalism and how news can travel on social media, because TMZ, had it first in our field. We look at it. It's like, here we go, TMZ. They're sensationalizing something, whatever. But they broke in a lot of stories over the years, and so you gotta respect that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Adrian Wojnarowski, the NBA reporter for ESPN, was like, "Yeah, this happened," that's when this was kind of Because one thing would be a basketball fan, and honestly, over like Trill can attest to this. Like, I spent a lot of time rooting for teams that weren't the Lakers in that space. So, but you respected them.
Yeah.
And you respected the game. You know you'll give it to you and give it to whatever team it was. But I guess for me, being in the space of his past problematic behavior, you kind of think about it. Well, should your first thought be, well, he might have been involved in a rape? No, it should be he died before his time in a messed up way. And you have to think about forgiveness and the aims of people who are quote unquote woke or whatever, and like what's their goal? Of first thing that flies out your mouth is his past, not like he died, not what his family thinking. Like, it could have been a situation that people that knew him like found out from these tweets. And you're sitting there like, where are you getting out of that? And when should we talk about his past problematic behavior? Yeah, but
Is
today,
it time? Is it too
at the time, like within the first 15 minutes of that happening, that's an awful time.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there like, what's really your aim? And for that person, for those people not to put that out, but not put out like the stuff he's done in the past. He said the stuff about gay people, and he learned from it. He actually worked with glad in other organizations and he moved on from it. But we
Yeah.
don't seem to hear that. We just hear about what you did. And some people always had you in that space, and they act like they're the arbiters of forgiveness. And who says who let you do that?
That's kind of the gift and the curse with social media is like, you know, there's um, a democratization of voice and who gets to be heard, who has access to the platform. Is kind of the level playing field. But I don't know. I kind of somewhat miss the days where I had to like, you know, wait until tomorrow morning to hear everybody's thoughts when they've gathered. You know what I mean? Like I was telling a homie, really I tweeted this. I was saying this feels somewhat like for me like when Harold Washington passed in Chicago. It was like a big deal. He was larger than life. It didn't feel real yet, but then it was like the next day, you know, I looked forward to reading the Sun Times to like really absorb what happened, really get critical thought on how we process this person's life and their legacy. And I think with social media, it becomes like, okay, let me Google a photo and post it, RIP emojis and all of that, and then it becomes a tweet from Woj. It becomes like, just so you know, this is real. You know, we're confirming what these other tweets were saying.
Yeah.
Like that's the first thing I get. Where in reality, you know, I mean, I'm still gonna probably do this. Is tomorrow I'll read the newspaper, or you know, I'll go online and look at like what columnists are saying, because I don't know. I like to process things a little slower than just, you know, a tweet or a picture and then that's it. Because I'm just starting to like really process that his daughter's gone. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Yeah.
that's like a 13-year-old passing is a little bit different than a 41-year-old passing. You
Yeah.
know, in
Yeah,
terms
fellas.
of
Yeah.
And then the family, you know, that is, you know, still that survived them, like the other three daughters and the wife and everyone.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
when we walked in and he hadn't gotten here yet, I said it. I for me, death has really become an interesting thing in how I process it. I've had a lot of family pass, and and a lot of friends pass in the last couple of years, and so at the age that I am, I don't feel old, but I definitely realize the value of life, and really been thinking a lot about like, what do I need to do to make sure that I build a legacy here to leave behind? And so when I thought about Kobe, my mind instantly went to his family. I did post a photo of him, and I didn't post a photo of him in a uniform. I posted a photo of him with his kids and his wife, because for me, the most impressive thing about Kobe Bryant, and I effectively in my basketball paradigm, I see him from an age perspective as of my era. He's our age.
Yeah,
You know,
he
he was the first that
41.
won the Dynamo from high school. That like for me, him and KG. Like I saw KG in high school. I went to Farragut games. Right. I remember going to the McDonald's All-America game with Kobe in it.
Yep.
Like I remember being there and seeing him. I remember having the Word Up magazine where he went to the prom with Brandy.
Yeah,
Like
that was like
those
the
were
whole thing.
though we were the same age
Did
group.
the slam dunk competition.
Yeah, all of that. But beyond the basketball, the piece of the man that won the Oscar,
Yeah.
that wrote a book that my 14-year-old nephew just loves, and I talked to my nephew before we started filming, and he was in tears, and I honestly didn't know what exactly to tell him, other than I'm sorry, man. You know, I've lost heroes too. I know how that feels. It's gonna be okay. He texted me before a few minutes ago and said, I don't really have anything to remember him by, and I said, yeah, you do. You have your book, the videos you could watch of him on the court, what you've read about him. But I said, if you want to honor him, know that Kobe worked very hard to be great at everything he did. And if there's any legacy that he left behind, it's the fact, whether it was on the court or off the court, he worked very hard to be great at whatever he tried to do. You know, because it does feel surreal still, you know, and trying to process and thinking about this brother who, I mean, he's of our era.
It's eerie though. It seemed like in this, you know, not to, you know, mess with the moment and bring other people's deaths into it. But like, even with Nip, when Nipsey Hussle passed away, it seemed like he had so much more to do, right? It seemed like he had just reached the cusp of getting ready to do more.
Yeah.
And with Kobe, it seemed like that. It seemed like, his basketball days were behind him, but he was starting to build this new legacy, and working in media. And, he was developing this AAU program around his daughter's interest in basketball. So that's why I like that whole aspect of it. They were on the way to a travel game when this happened. So to think about, like, a lot of that being cut short, and then it just really is like, well, how do we carry on? Is as much as you think, like, okay, financially everybody's set, right? But is the impact of what he was about to do, like, gonna be as influential as if, say, he lived to be where Bill Russell is right now? Even when I look at MJ, you know what I mean? Like, MJ has progressed into being an owner, has progressed into being, like, one of the first black billionaires in this country, and he's wielding influence that now, if, say, he passed at 41, he wouldn't be able to, like, do. Like, I think MJ is moving into a space now where he's just now starting to think about being a humanitarian.
Right. Legacy is really, he's starting to see it now.
You know what I mean? Whereas, like, LeBron James came up in a different era where I think personal branding and just being in the spotlight at a young age, he's, constantly curating his legacy right now as he's the best player in the world. He's already built a media company. He's already doing, like, he's already figured out his next chapter. He's already figuring out things before he's done for his family and setting his son up to be a basketball player. All these different things that he's doing. Having ownership and franchises and things like that. But I feel like, Kobe was just turning that corner. He was like an old school, like, all I am right now is a superstar athlete, zeroed in. We talk about this Mamba mentality that he had, that he kind of, put forth on the court. He was starting to put that forth off the court.
Yeah.
And, you just mentioned, some of the things that he did that people might find problematic. In terms of his dealings with women or whatever, but, like, I think about the fact that, like, think about how young he was when he was thrust into the league, and how young he was when he was thrust into fame. And so, I mean,
17.
A lot of people do dumb shit when they're younger, and, like, when you're in the spotlight, you get held accountable for that a little bit more. I mean, we're talking about, I don't know how long ago that incident even happened, his legal situation, but we're talking almost, I would say, 15, 20 years? You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that was like 2003.
Yeah, like, you have a chance to evolve and and move forward and do different things in life and learn from your mistakes. And, I just think it's kind of crazy to think that he's not going to get a chance to kind of turn that corner and do some of the things that I think he was starting to put forth and think about doing.
Right, definitely, because a lot of some people get out there like, well, they want some type of apology from him, and, like, you kind of think about, like, why do you want that apology? And, like, maybe you never know, like, him getting involved with the WNBA and with his daughter's budding basketball career, maybe dials his way for atone for his mistakes, and, like, forgiveness and how you handle it comes in different ways, because you could do, like, a Kevin Hart apology where you don't, like, kind of, like, say, like, what you did and why it was problematic. Maybe this was his way of saying, like, hey, I fucked up. Let me.
But I actually want to say something to that, though, because he was acquitted.
He was.
Yeah.
So we don't, like, really know. So it's not a Bill Cosby scenario.
Right. Like, apologize for what? And if you read
some
some
of
of
the, for even bringing that up, watch out.
I mean, I don't really particularly care. We have a justice system in this country that is not very fair to black people, and particularly not fair to black men in the first place. And so then you have a situation where you're in. He wasn't in Chicago in court. He was in Colorado. Yeah. Where the jury of his peers did not resemble him anyway, and he was acquitted. And so apologize for what? Like, I know people aren't going to like that. That might not be popular to some folk. They'll say he was just an athlete, this, that, and the other. But, again, he stood trial for what he stood trial for. And I don't think that should be his legacy. I think Kobe's legacy, and Naledge, you were saying it was coming into, like, the back of my brain as you were speaking about it. the bridge that he was from Michael to LeBron
Yeah.
is actually very similar. We were talking earlier about being like Oregon Trailers, which is this idea of remembering things pre-digital.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe was really that.
Mm-hmm.
He effectively wrote the book for LeBron on how to deal with social media, how to live in this like fast-paced, information-driven, instant gratification society.
And going from high school to
the league. Like Mike there was a lot Mike didn't have to deal with.
That's true.
Which has shaped how Mike is now.
Exactly.
Mike didn't have to worry about off the court legacy because the only thing people talked about Mike in those times were on the court and what he
Right.
did on the court.
Right.
He didn't have to worry about cameras following him 24/7. Kobe, however, coming into the league in 1996 at 17. He didn't have that at first, but he got that as social media developed. And so he figured out a lot of stuff right with some of the challenges he had, some of the things he had to overcome, the obstacles. Like he was learning on the fly. And now has wrote the book for LeBron who can see that.
Yeah.
And LeBron from the time he was 12 years old, right? If you watch, what is the Laura Marion, no, that's Kobe School, but the More Than a Game, the documentary.
Yes.
Like LeBron was being curated and coached and had people around him and insulated himself with a lot of the right folk.
Yep.
I got to give Maverick and his family credit.
St. Vincent, St. Mary.
A lot of credit because they protected him. And so LeBron was thinking about legacy when he was 13.
Right.
And so we're
He was
seeing
a businessman at that
he was a
point. He was
businessman.
already a businessman.
So the manifestations of what he's built, what he's been able to do, a lot of that has come from Kobe. Mike didn't have to write that playbook.
Mike's a hooper.
Mike's a hooper.
He's like, everything I built is that
Basketball.
Jumpman logo.
That's it.
Everything. Dunking.
I mean, kids these days never saw him play, but they got a pair of Jordans. That's
Right.
I'll show you right there.
That's it.
So yeah,
When you Google Mike quotes, when you Google Mike videos, 99% of the things you see on Mike are basketball. Whereas with Kobe, it's been a little different. Kobe was in TV shows. Kobe was in, Mike did some of that too, but Kobe really wrote that, like, here's how you become a global star, right? Mike laid the foundation. Kobe built on top of it. LeBron is the crowning achievement of what that looks like. And I think henceforth, the player, whoever's next in that pantheon of the basketball superpowers or your basketball, Mount Rushmore, they have a playbook now. That is beyond. It is more than a game now. It is, and I think that's why so many people have been responding. And you have international world leaders, President Obama, tweeting and sharing their memories of this person who, some are current, but he's just a basketball player. He's more, so much more.
Yeah. It's
had his favorite soccer team tweeting out messages in Spanish. Barcelona.
Yeah.
Like they're tweeting out stuff about him. So to show you he was a global brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's. I don't know. Like, there's a certain level of celebrity that I think we almost look at as like untouchable or superhuman. Or
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? It's larger than life, and I think to many Kobe was like a superhero. So the idea, and then even I mentioned before this whole idea of the Mamba, and like he was very much a perfectionist. He was very much like somebody who was very meticulous about from everything about the way he presented himself on the court, from the way he measured his interviews, from the way that he moved around through the world. I think most people were like, Kobe wouldn't make no mistake that would put him in a space where he could, an accident would happen. I think like most times people think, well, if somebody like Kobe passed, it was like somebody had to do something to him. Like, like somebody had to be hating on him or
conspiracy theory.
Yeah, but in reality, what it's seeming to be is that literally this is just human error, or just something, the luck of the draw per se. But it's like for somebody whose luck has always been on the up and up, it just don't seem real.
And
you know what I mean?
I want to piggyback off of what you were saying, because when I found out he passed away, it was when I was on my way here. I was in the drive-thru at McDonald's. Don't judge me. And I'm
What's
looking.
your birthday?
Yeah, you know.
Right.
And I'm waiting in the drive-thru, so I look at my phone just to check messages, to see what you guys are talking about. If any updates, and then I see one of my group chats. And then my friend sent the link to the TMZ article, and then the emoji with the shocked face. And I'm like, what is this? and I see the headline. I'm like, Kobe Bryant dies. So when you mention like someone who's like a larger than life figure, almost like an enigma type of thing, and I see that he passed away, I was like, whoa. It kind of humanized him, and it reminded me of how fragile life is. And I didn't even want to believe it at first because how information passes these days. Everything is like instant, so you have a chance to fact check and make sure things are real. So I didn't even want to tell people that he passed away because I think I found out about it like right when TMZ posted it. And I'm like, this can't be real. I'm not going to tell anybody yet that he died. Like, this is probably, maybe he was just in the accident. He's in the hospital, and then boom,
It don't seem right.
Yeah. Even I remember I saw a tweet from, I guess, the county where the crash took place. Even they were saying a crash happened, but they didn't mention anyone.
Right.
So I kind of, was going as a journalist and other folks, just going through my checks and balances of. Because these days, like, a lot of us get in trouble for wanting to be the first but not being right. And you can't take that away if somebody tweets out there like this happened and it turns out it didn't. That's
has to be
all people going to remember you as. You're the guy the person who put that out there. It wasn't even real.
Right.
And you give credence to quote-unquote fake news and everything else.
Yeah, the age of expediency. And you probably see this firsthand. Like, we're so quick to try to break stuff now as opposed to, like, getting, like, the facts of the matter straight. I mean, they had killed off Rick Fox in the same thing earlier in the same crash. And,
that's crazy.
And Rick had to come out. He texts Woj, and Woj said, "I've talked to Rick. He's fine."
Yeah.
He's actually sharing narrative of like his relationship with Kobe and talking about that.
Yeah. It's interesting how that stuff gets out there.
It's crazy now. And even I was driving up, and I got the text messages about it, and I Googled first because I was like, let me see if this is real. And the only thing that was up was a TMZ link at that time. And then their site crashed.
Oh, yeah, it was crashing left and right.
Yeah.
You have
these...
you have these moments, man. And
there's still stuff coming to my phone.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, too, I think this speaks to how we as a people now process grief. Like, grief is almost fast food. You know? Like, you see it, you post it, OMG, tomorrow or next week we'll be on to the next thing.
Is that it?
You know?
The next hashtag.
And there was a time where, like, I think going back to Harold's, Washington's passing, that lingered over the city for...
Still to this day.
To this day. But, like, people grieved. And they did the funeral procession through the city. I was a kid. Standing on the corner at 86 and Sangamon where we lived in Auburn Gresham. And I remember watching the casket, the hearse roll by, and my mom crying. And I didn't know at the time, like I knew somebody passed, but I didn't know why. And she said, you'll always remember this day. This is our first black mayor. He was a great man. Right?
Maybe a third grade when that happened. I remember.
And changed the course.
Yeah, I remember in that school program, and the teacher, like, if it was in front of us, she was looking down at first, and she looked up, and she was like, the mayor died.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't really grasp it until I remember my dad took me and my sister to, like, the funeral procession, like, right at Old Wood Cemetery where he's buried. I still remember, like, how sad, the look on people's face, how sad they were. It's like older black folks, like, knew, like, this is... I feel like they knew this wasn't going to happen again.
You're right, because the course of our city, you think about the long tenure that Daley had. Like, does that happen if Harold lives? What is the course of action? You're thinking about, like, in that scenario, the fact that he really made black people a part of his agenda. So where is Black Chicago at if Harold gets that type of tenure that Daley had? The people who, you got to think about, it's such a trickle down effect. Like the same way there's Daley's guys, there's Rom's guys, there's, you know what I mean? Eventually there will be people who were part of, that's Lori's guy or whatever. Like there are people whose entire, professional careers were based off of one person. Like there's people whose legacy to this day is still like, I worked for Harold Washington. Right. And that's how they're able to move through the space. I think, think about like, there's been a ton of documentaries and things talking about when Pac passed and when Big passed. And like, think about we're surrounded by records right now, but like Jay-Z, it's Jay-Z who Jay-Z is right
Just
now.
Big is
If
alive.
Big passes and Pac doesn't pass, like, the course of history is now going to be changed in thinking about basketball, and I think, Kobe's now going to be immortalized in a way differently than, say, if he lived to be 90 years old. It's going to take on a life of its own.
I think that timing wise too is really interesting.
Eerie.
Like the day after LeBron passes him on the list, but also in the same week of time we honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And what I was looking up at the same point in time is like, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. passed at 39 years old, and while their work was different, it can be argued, their impact, especially on the black community, can be felt and reverberated as widely.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting to think, and you were going there earlier, about what this means to the future.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when people pass at such a young age, they stop and they instantly become their forever visioned or seen in that age. Martin Luther King was 39. He was born in 1929. And people don't equate MLK to Barbara Walters or Berry Gordy or Audrey Hepburn, but they were all born the same year.
Huh.
Right? And others have gotten to age.
Yeah.
Others are still doing the work on TV. MLK's life stopped at the same age that I am, at 39. Kobe Bryant is 41. And I think if there's anything that's tragic and sad about that, all of it's tragic and sad, but the part that really is almost gut-wrenching beyond his daughter passing is the fact that we'll never know what was to come. I agree with you. I think the greatest moments for him lied ahead.
Yeah.
Knowing that the work ethic that he had and the way and how brilliant he was, spoke multiple, he was applying it in other places in private equity, buying businesses and growing them, really thinking about how to increase equity and practicing inclusion, bringing people into spaces that never got to do that. The art component of what he was doing, a brilliant writer, filmmaker, those things,
he was a whisperer too. You
Man.
can see it. Jason Tatum,
right?
Right. Kyrie Irving,
Yes.
he was starting to put his hands in spaces where he would identify. I don't know if anybody watched the details segment that he would do on ESPN, where he would dissect games and he would dissect players and how they were moving. He was starting to get into a space of mentorship that I think MJ never openly embraced. Where it's I know I'm Kobe, but I can help these other people to be great.
Yep.
I could see coaching in his future for
Yep.
sure. I could see team ownership in his future. I could see a lot of philanthropy. I could see a lot of him being able to leverage his brand in a way. In a way that was gonna affect change in society. It probably still will, but it's just gonna be so different. You know what I mean? Because I think having the person themselves be there. He's gonna kind of transcend in a way that maybe Walter Payton.
Yeah.
Now I think about Walter Payton as a high school. You don't always think about the person; you just think about the name. And I think it's gonna be similar in that Kobe will probably have his name on a lot of different things, and the younger generation will just know he was a great person, but may not know why or just to the extent. I'm old school to a certain extent. I'm on the end of the millennial thing, and so I just think I just hope that it's not so microwave mourning that we see, because I think that the impacts of this will be deep. I could even imagine that there will be Kobe patches on every jersey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's gonna
both teams today
he's
took,
that level of an icon.
Yeah.
This is this is a day to remember.
24 retired across the league.
Right now, he was their favorite player.
Yeah.
So there goes there.
And that's the part of it that's kind of ill. You didn't have to be a basketball fan to know who Kobe Bryant was.
Right.
He's one of the most recognizable human beings on Earth. You know what I mean? And so the gravity of this, I'm interested to see if Nip's legacy has held pretty strong, and people now are I was talking about it earlier. They fly to LA and they feel like they got to go to Crenshaw and take a picture in front of that mural still. But I'm like, yo, if Nip had Staples Center, Nip has this mural, what do we give Kobe? Because that, like, no offense to Nip, like, Kobe's a different level of icon. And so I'm just hoping that we don't move on to the next or move on to where we make it about us. I think that's the other thing that social media does, where it's like, we're pained about what he gave to us, not necessarily pained about the fact that his family is grieving, or the fact that his wife now doesn't have a husband, or the fact that, like, his daughter, you know, I think that's going to get lost in this. And that's the part that I think sucks about this information age that's so fast and speedy. But you know, the same thing that I don't like is the same thing I do like with which is the fact he was able to touch so many people so quickly. And so, you know, I think I'm still in shock.
I hope people take from this, and I said this with Nip too. They think about, like, what your impact is here, what your responsibility is here as a person, and look at the model beyond the basketball of him giving back and what he did for his people and his community. Both him and Nip, I think the same thing is, like, what are you doing and what is your plan to do? 41 is not old. No. You know, tomorrow is not promised. And we say that all the time, but it's not cliche. Yeah. Like, if you're sitting at home and you're like, I'm waiting to start something, I'm waiting to do something, stop waiting. Like, that's always my thing. I think I talked to you guys the reason why I started painting, and I shared the story of, like, I was sitting with a brother named Brian Sleek.
Yep.
You know, December 23rd. We were talking about what we talked about when we got together, the city and politics. And his question to me was, you know, if you decide to run, what is going to be your thing, your outlet for that? Because you are not going to be able to go down to Springfield and deal with all this on your own, brother. Like, I've been in the game too long. I know how stressful it is. And we talked about vacation. We talked about all these things, like what he was coaching me on, like, finding something to be an outlet. He passed 3 days later, the day after his birthday, right after Christmas.
He's another one who
at 41
was talking about what he was about to do.
Right, 41, 42. I can't remember. Vision. I think he was 41, right?
Had a real clear vision.
Real clear vision.
I saw him at the cigar shop, and we were talking, and I'm talking about that brother was in the best mood that I had seen him.
Yeah.
You know, and we had probably one of the most ill conversations. Like I knew him. Like, we weren't, like, best friends or nothing like that, but, like, we definitely always, like, circled in the same spaces or whatever. But that particular evening, we just happened to be, like, in a one-on-one scenario, and we were talking. Like, he was asking me about grad school and things. He's like, "What is, like, your next thing?" You know what I'm saying? Because he's like, "I see you doing these moves that are, like, different than what people even know you for at this point, and, like, what are you trying to, like, you know?" So I was starting to lay out some of my plans and some of the things that I wanted to do, and then I kind of flipped it on him, and I'm like, "Yo, you've been doing X, Y, and Z. Like, what is it you were about to do?" And it's like, I think he had finally figured out, like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do,
right?
You know, and he had kind of, like, charted out. You know, sometimes when you ask people what they're about to do, they stutter and they stammer and they stare off into space. Like, he had a very clear vision, even in talking about his health and how he wanted to fix that. So it's, like, all ironic that often that happens at that moment, that people are just figuring out life and where they want to take it to the next level.
And you called it out, the piece that they both were doing. Like, it's interesting too, the mentoring aspect of it. Like, that's what he was doing for me. It was like, that's what he was in the conversations with you. Like, I want to give and I want to help, and I'm giving back, and I've been doing it. And they both had increased the scale in which they were doing it.
And I can leverage it now.
And making up, and I can create the space and time to do it now. And then you have this happen. And that's like, you know, we said this year about our content, we were going to be more intentional. And what we did, what we put out, we wanted to give to the people out there. And hopefully people listening are like, I'm going to get up off my butt and I'm going to go do that thing. That's what the Go Defenders, like, what we talked about was, like, people that are building in Chicago. We building. We bringing these folk on. And over the season 1 and season 2, we've identified these people, and we have more coming that are building. To sit in this empty seat today, and it's empty in honor of Kobe. We left it empty for him, symbolically. But yo, we want y'all to build. We want y'all to build. You know, that's what we're hoping to supply you with is information so that you can take it and go do that thing you need to do in your life, whether it's healthcare or create something creative, music, financial literacy. When we had Ross on last season, we want you to build, and that's the idea behind this.
Yeah, and these conversations need to happen more regularly. I even think to another point, like planning for the future also deals with like planning for accidents as well. You know, life insurance, estate planning, living trusts, wills. Those are things that I think in the black community we often don't talk about. And then, you know, you just mentioned that you've had family members pass. I've had family members pass as well, where it was unexpected. And now people are like scrambling, trying to figure out what to do in the aftermath, whether it's fighting over money, whether it's fighting over property, whether it's figuring out if the ex-wife or the first wife or who gets what and how is that going to go, because we don't anticipate. You know, my best friend from kindergarten passed away at 17. You know what I'm saying? And I remember like his mother had set everything up, but she was a lawyer. So it was all set up in a way in which when he passed, it was very cut and dry. And I remember thinking that was like not what I knew to happen in most families. And you know, on some level, I think that it was great to see how she had kind of put that together, and that the family was going to be able to benefit off of that tragedy. Can't bring him back, but they were able to not be stuck in a rut like I see sometimes happening in our community when people go away. And, you know, I think it can also be a lesson in thinking about legacy, not just planning for being here, but planning for not being here as well. As much as we don't like to think about that, that's what generational wealth comes from, is thinking about long after you're gone and having those things in place while you still have the energy, while you still have your faculties. I urge our listeners to look into that. You know what I'm saying? It's never too early to look into that stuff. As morbid as it seems, it's never too early to look into that.
I mean,
stuff.
Ross came on and talked about that. If you go back to our Black Wealth Matters episode in season 1, you can see the conversation around like his Jewish friends and how they buy life insurance policies for their children, whole life policies for their kids that they pay off in 25 years. So by the time the kid's 25, there's a cash value whole life policy sitting there, not for the kid. God forbid something happens for the kid, but they're buying that for their grandchildren, knowing that one day the kid will pass on, and they'll be gone. Like you know, if I buy a policy now for a child that I have today and I pay on it for 25 years, the premiums will be lower, and I'm not doing that for the kid. That's for my grandchildren, so that they're leaving wealth as a legacy for kids, and that's something that we've talked about this on our show. In our community, we have to get better at. We don't want to think about that in these terms, but it, you know, what we see today and what we continue seeing, whether it's been Juice WRLD or Nip or the numerous people that have passed in the last 12 months that we've seen directly, like, yo, this is a young person. Accidents and tragedies happen. And how do we plan? We have to get out of the habit in our community of, you know, we lost somebody and now we on social media posting GoFundMes for that. And I see that far too often, and oftentimes for people who I knew had good jobs. Like, you had a good job, and we have to pull and pass the bucket to cover the funeral. We don't need to do that anymore. And we don't, you know, the one thing like I've worked at last year was part of my year of planning, because I said if something happened to me, I didn't want to be a burden to my family. I didn't want to, and I have income and I have things, assets, and so it's just me. So I wanted to structure things so that my nephew will get something. My parents won't have to know or figure out where things are. There's an estate plan, like things that I paid for, such that there's a plan. And that's the other message. Get off your butt. But the second one, to Naledge's point, is have a plan.
Don't put things off.
Don't put things off.
Because you don't really know what's next. I think it's super eerie. We mentioned 2 musicians and talking about Kobe. It's Grammy night, and a lot of people are going to be at the Staples Center tonight. And I just saw a post from Andrew Barber from Fake Short Drive, and he was saying like it don't feel right. Like they've already put like in loving memory of Kobe Bryant on the front of the Staples Center, so it's just like an interesting, eerie feel to the day now, and knowing that this has occurred, and I can't say there's any closure about it right now. Obviously, this has just happened, but I didn't see that there'd be a way that we could not talk about this for an episode, rather than come on here and talk about the latest episode of Power or something. Like this is something that is really, the impact of this is we'll remember this.
Yeah.
And now it's documented
Where we were.
right, and so I just think the idea of legacy is something that we want to preach. It's something we have been preaching, but I think it's something that we want our viewers and our listeners to take heed upon, whether you were a fan of Kobe or not, whether you really pay attention to what's going on in the news. Pay attention to yourself and pay attention to the things that you want to accomplish in the future. And on that note, I guess we can wrap this up. You know what I'm saying? It's another episode of the Go Defenders. Knowledge Born, Jeff Beckham, Evan Moore, 12 Gage, Mario on the ones and twos. Please hit us up on Instagram, any social media, Facebook, however you want to reach out to us, Twitter. Talk about some of the topics you want to reach out to us about. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts on this episode.
Oh, and shout out to our team, Trill and Gemini.
Yes,
we
sir.
mentioned them in the show.
Yeah, we
but
switched over.
We got a new squad for season 2 that are awesome, professional. They do their thing. DJ Gemini Jones, Trill on the video, and we appreciate them both. So when y'all hear us mentioning them, they're the team behind the creative. So peace.
Yes, sir. We out.